Thanks for coming. Just quick, I guess, housekeeping items. I've got 45 minutes, and I'm personally a little bit concerned that I may not be able to get through everything, but I really want to, more for the benefit of you guys attending. So normally I would love to just talk very kind of calm like this and be very chill and everything, but I'm just giving you kind of an advance warning that you guys may need to strap in, and I may go through some of this stuff rather fast in kind of like shotgun style, which is not typically my style, but it's more just so I can get through everything. If I miraculously have time in 45 minutes to give any Q&A, I'm absolutely happy to do that. If I can't get to the Q&A, I'm more than happy to be standing outside this room and talk to you guys till I'm blue in the face. So, so just keep that in mind. So, unless you have some urgent need to raise a question in the middle of my thing, I'll just go into monologue mode, and you guys can just absorb like a sponge. The other thing, you know, this panel is really about kind of reflecting on my past and my career and all the different things I've worked on. It's by far nowhere near all the things I've worked on, and I've tried to pick a couple of things that you guys might find interesting, or you know, some insights that you haven't heard before. However, that being said, it's very difficult for games that are, you know, maybe been around for 20 years or 10 years or even in these days and age, even 2 years, to have stories that people haven't already heard. And I've tried going back through some of my things and think about stuff that I personally don't necessarily remember people spotting or knowing. So I'm going to cover some of that today. But there is going to be some stuff in here that I think some of you guys have seen, some of the stuff you guys may have heard, but you might get another dimension of that, or like maybe a little bit more reason why certain things were the way they were. So I can't give you a full guarantee that everything you're going to hear today is going to be like, oh my god, but hopefully you'll find some cool stuff. So with that being said, let's get jamming. 301. Okay, so just a quick little background around me. So I've been in the game industry over 20 years. I also used to work in the music industry too. Kind of music and games are kind of my two biggest passions. I've been, you know, I've done countless interviews and been in all different places, but you know, I've worked for 5 different game companies, 3 Japanese, 1 in Europe, and 1 in America. So basically Konami, Namco, and Sega. Psygnosis, which doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, thank you. And Electronic Arts. And within that volume of work, I've had over 17 years just working with Japanese game companies alone, which, as a Westerner, and anyone who's in the West trying to work, you know, with Japanese, it's not easy. It's a very different way of working and thinking. But the few people that can somehow manage to either have a high tolerance for pain or just kind of be willing to work through the frustrations, a lot of amazing things can happen when you work with the Japanese, and I've kind of built a lot of my career around that. Over in that whole span of over 22 years, I've launched over 100 different products and games, pretty much across console, digital, mobile, including top 10 industry franchises, and I've also taken stuff that, you know, wasn't a big franchise and made it huge. But what's quite interesting is that out of all the things I've worked on, 25 franchises are featured in the book of 1001 video games you must play before you die. Now, granted, by percentage, that's a very low percent, but to have, you know, 25 represented in that book is pretty awesome. Beyond that, I've also sort of been like, I wouldn't necessarily call myself the godfather by any means, but certainly when people go and look at what really caused the music game phenomenon that happened here in the West, basically it stems back to me really pushing it and growing it and building it and making it something that even Konami themselves didn't want to do, and I just never gave up. And then once I showed the potential and then it took off, I basically was able to really do everything that I wanted to do. And with that, with Dance Dance Revolution, I actually won an MTV Video Music Award for Best Video Game Soundtrack. Beyond that, like with my portfolio of games, I've covered everything from kids, families, teens, casual, core, hardcore gamers, RPGs, zombie fests, I mean, stuff for kids. I mean, it's just every kind of across the board. My first job working in the game industry was when I was 14. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And at 15, I helped launch an amateur video game publication as a columnist. The first game system I ever had was the original Pong. But the first game system I personally bought with my hard-earned cash was the Sega Genesis. I'm a big fan of pinball and classic gaming. I actually own 3 pinballs myself, Doctor Who, the original Star Wars, and Bonsai Run. I also have several arcade cabinets. I also have a full-on DDR machine and a full-on Beatmania machine in my house. Alright, so with that, keep going. Sega. So, how I got into the industry, obviously it started with the Genesis, but if I back up, how did I get the Genesis? Well, when I'm 12 years old, I mowed a lot of yards. I was living in Chicago, and the summers are brutal in the Midwest, the humidity. But I was like, the Genesis is going to come out in a year from now. I got to start saving now so that I have the money. My parents aren't going to buy it for me. So by making a lot of mowing yards, I was able to bring in a lot of cash. But oh wait a minute, that's not right. It looked more like this. I brought in this much cash, and then by the time the Genesis came out, on the first day, first week, I was able to come in to Toys R Us, proud as I was at 13, and be able to plunk down the dollars to buy the Genesis. And as soon as I had it, it was a love affair. I just really enjoyed my Genesis, and played the heck out of Altered Beast. That came with it, but after one too many werewolf metamorphoses, which actually was just 4 days later of owning the system, I needed to go back in and buy a new game. So I actually bought Thunder Force 2, and when I went into the store, I'm actually shopping in the game aisle for software, but most of the people at that time were in the store just kind of had their eyes Googled on the demo station for the Genesis because they didn't have the Genesis yet. They were all just like, wow, this looks so amazing. And here I am in the next section over. I'm like, what game do I want to buy? And all these people saw like, what the heck is this kid doing? He's buying games with this console that just came out. So they started talking to me, and I started talking to them, and I pretty much back then knew everything I could about the Genesis, so I would just rattle off all the specs and all the things and all the why you should get it and this and that and the other thing. And parents were there with their kids, and not every time, but a lot of times I'd actually end up helping those kids get Genesis systems because the parents would be like, wow, okay, yeah, let's get this, for Tommy, and they'd walk out buying a machine. And so I played Thunder Force 2, loved it. About 2 weeks later, I walked back in and I got Ghouls and Ghosts. Again, my hard-earned lawn mowing money's paying off. And then eventually I came back in and I wanted to get the Revenge Shinobi. And as I walked into the store, this is where the pivotal moment. I walked in, I was about to buy it, and I saw this display counter thing that Sega had, and it was this offer for a mail-in rebate that if you basically had bought a Genesis system, you could send in your receipt and proof of purchase, whatever, and then you could pick from a big list, which in Revenge of Shinobi was on that list, you could pick a free game and one free controller, which, back then, you're talking about a $59.99 game, the controller is probably about $29, and that's like a $90 value. And for me, that just saved me having to mow 8 yards. So I immediately rip off this rebate slip. I'm like, I'm not even going to buy Revenge Shinobi today. I'm going to just send this thing in. I flip it over, and it's like, you must buy your Genesis from X date to like X date. And of course, that window was after the period that I bought mine. And I was like, man, that sucks. Because I feel like, I supported Genesis from day one. I really believed in it, and I really wanted to, just help others enjoy what I'm enjoying about the console. So I thought, what the hell, I'm just going to write Sega a letter. And, just basically kind of tell them about my passion and why I love the Genesis, and tell them a little bit about this story of going into the stores and kind of helping people, also get Genesis, and then I somehow dovetail that into, hey, I saw this offer, and, I know I don't meet the qualifications of the rules and blah, 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 but if you wouldn't be so kind, could you please send me a free game controller? I mean, basically that would be the punchline. But I knew sending that would probably never get a response. But being as I was back then, knowing all things I could about Sega, I was like, you know what, I'm not going to just send this letter to Sega, like just a random address that's just going to go filed into some customer service bin. I'm like, I'm going to write this letter addressed to the president of Sega, which was Tom Kalinske at the time. And so I typed it, nicely done, nicely worded, envelope was typed, and I sent it off. And again, I'm not expecting a response. About about a month or so later, my parents say to me, hey, there's someone on the phone for you. And I'm like, who is it? And they're like, well, it's Sega. And my parents, I love them to death, but they like to play a lot of pranks. So I'm like, yeah, Mom, sure, Sega's on the phone. And I went into the room to go pick up the phone. And back then, when you had real phones, you know, you could always play that trick where like Dad could be in the other room and pick the phone up at the same time, and then like you basically feel like you're having a conversation with somebody, but you're not really having a conversation. As soon as I picked up the phone, though, it was a woman on the other line, and it definitely was my mom. And she's like, you know, my name's, you know, Deb. I'm calling from the office of the president of Sega of America, and you know, she's like, you know, we wanted to give you a call because we got your letter, and we were just really impressed with your, you know, enthusiasm for Sega, and you know, hearing about your story and how you've been trying to support us, and you know, we just really, it's one of the first letters that we've received, actually. And so she's like, well, we're not going to have any problem honoring, you know, your request for that, you know, free gaming controller. But she's like, but we're going to send you a lot of free games. And then she's like, and then from now on, any Sega game that you want to get, you don't have to go to the store to buy it. You can just order it directly from us, you know, at our employee rate. And then she said also, this is all in the same call, a span of about 5 minutes of conversation. And then she said also, we wanted to know if you'd be interested in working with us. Or for us is actually what she said. 14. And I think my response was, you know, I still kind of very much vividly remember the call, but I think I was just like, what would you like me to do? You know, I think that's really what it was. It wasn't like, yeah, or, you know, like any kind of, you know, lame sort of response. It was sort of like, yeah, I'm ready for this, okay? So they're like, well, hey, we really need someone like you that really loves Sega, that really knows the games, very passionate, can talk about what makes these games great. And in particular, we need that kind of person in front of the people like the buyers who buy the retail stores, and they're not the ones that play these games. They're not the ones that understand why this game is better than that game. And so they said, for starters, why don't we have you like basically come out to the CES? So this is way before E3 existed. Video games were basically part of the Consumer Electronics Show, and back then it was 2 times a year, summer in Chicago, and I happen to live in Chicago, and then winter in Vegas. And now CES is still a huge show, but they've only done it now once a year, which is still in Vegas. But you know, here I dumped these up out of my garage. I had to go through like 20,000 boxes to find this crap, but I saved them. But like, this is like literally, these are like, if you felt this, it's like a credit card. That's how they made exhibitor badges back then, because we didn't have laser printing and cool stuff like this. It's all like hard pressed into plastic. It's really weird. But so, you know, I did CES shows for a couple of years, and I was actually there when Sonic the Hedgehog, the very first Sonic the Hedgehog was ever first demoed to the public, and I would basically come in several days before the show, and they would have a stack of all this paraphernalia and pamphlets and information. We're talking about 20, 30 games that they're going to be showing, and I would just sit like a sponge, absorb all of it to like memory, and then be ready to talk about it and have some chance to play the games too before that. But you know, certainly while I was there, I got to see not just Sonic, but a lot of these other amazing games first ever get debuted and be a part of them. And I also feel like out of all the eras of Sega, I got to work at Sega at the best time, when it was really like back to this cool console war kind of stuff. So needless to say, Sega and the Genesis is very near and dear to my heart. It's always going to be, because it's kind of the beginning of my career. And when you get to a point when you're 15 and you're getting Sonic and Tails holiday greeting cards from Sega directly, and then like your local newspaper profiles you, I mean, this is just like, you know, you're onto something. So, moral of the story is, you know, in my case of how I got into the industry, you could say I found the secret staircase in Zelda, but I want to make it clear to all you guys is that literally, you can carve any path to get into this industry. Even if you're sitting there now wishing that you'd gotten into the industry and you still haven't, I guarantee you now, there's way more opportunity for you to get into games than there was when I did. And you know, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you know, it'd be like a long shot that you'd be able to just make that happen. And even my story is just weird stars aligning. You know, I sent a damn letter, I didn't think I'd get a response, or get a job out of it, for that matter. And so, but today, there's so many more opportunities. So please, if you're passionate about games, and this is something you want to do in your life, don't stop yourself from trying. There's so many ways you can do it. A Twitch streamer, you know, an esports player, you know, whatever, PR, story design, whatever it is, whatever your focus is, just make it and just go with it. So that's Sega. Now on to Konami. Woo. Man, I got 30 more minutes. Silent Hill 2. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Silent Hill. So this is, you might say at a Portland Retro Game Expo, well, why the hell are you talking about Silent Hill? I mean, why aren't we talking about, like, you know, old arcade games and stuff? Well, the crazy thing now, even I have to, you know, ponder this, is that a game like Silent Hill 2, based on when it came out, is now almost classified as a retro game in terms of being at its age. You know, I think this came out in 2001, and I can't believe that it's, you know, we're not too far from calling it a 20-year-old game. One thing about Silent Hill 2 is, and you know, some of you may already know this, there's been a lot of articles in the past about how parts of the game are very reminiscent to a town in Northern California called San Bruno. And San Bruno, if you've never been, it's basically adjacent to the San Francisco International Airport. So, as you can imagine, a lot of developers, especially, you know, from the Japanese side, when they come over to visit, they're flying into San Francisco Airport. And San Bruno is right there. And so what you see here is, on the far left will always be the actual building or place in San Bruno. Of course, I think a lot of these are demolished now, but then the middle screen is actually, before the game came out, and when we were first sort of teasing kind of what the game looked like, and you know, just to kind of get some of the initial buzz, you'll see kind of like pre-release screens. And then the screens on the far right, unfortunately, they don't have the fog effects, because basically someone has gone in with like the PC version, turned the fog off, just so that they can have a very clear picture of the architecture. But you'll see, basically, the images on the left are the real. The ones in the middle are almost spinning reel of recreations of the ones on the left. And of course, there would have been some problems had it used exactly those images in the game. So they the team modified them to make them still, architecturally speaking, almost identical to the middle row, middle column, but they changed the names and stuff like that. So this is one example. Here's another. I mean, look at this thing, the coin laundry, and then look at it there in the middle screens, and then obviously on the right, you can't tell it's a laundry store anymore. This one here, the latte shop. Now the middle screen's kind of caught at a different angle, but you see where those tree bushes are. You can almost see the exact same logo of the coffee shop. But then on the right, it got changed to I forget what it's called now. Here's some other shots. Now these kind of stayed as is because they're kind of nondescript. It's not like you can say, oh, that's my business. But where did I must have got rid of those slides. I had a slide in here. Maybe it's coming up. Oh yeah, maybe it's coming up. Oh yeah, it's coming up. Here's just some shots of me way back. It's weird looking at these pictures. With some of the Silent Hill 2 team members. Imamura-san was the executive producer. Yamaoka-san is very famous in sound. He's certainly for Silent Hill series, he did all the music. But even beyond Silent Hill, he's an amazing, talented musician and game musician. And then Sato-san on the far right corner there did all the visual CGI for Silent Hill 2. But anyway, since the team basically had to change some of those buildings I had just shown you, here's another example. So I forget what this store was on the left, but you know, on the right, or in the middle, it's basically identical again, and the team had to change it. Now, I didn't talk to the team about this, but when they went to rename it, they called it Big J's. And now, as you can see in kind of these previous pictures, I mean, I was kind of a big guy. And you know, and I'm not that way now, but I have a feeling, you know, the team was like, oh, we're just going to make this a little commemorative for Jason and call it Big J's. And and here's the other thing, this is the part that people don't know. Why San Bruno was used, it's not really any specific reason. Sure, the team saw it when they fly into town, but it just so happened that when we were developing the game, I lived in San Bruno. So when the team wanted to meet up or go out for dinner or whatever, we were going to San Bruno a lot. And the team just liked a lot of the visuals. So anyway, another thing, just very quickly, Silent Hill 2, about a year ago, a guy posted this out. It's using some new hacking tools of the PC version, was able to go to parts of the game that you're not really ever supposed to go to. I'm not going to show this in here, but anyone of you that's a Silent Hill fan, you should definitely watch this video. It's about 15 minutes long, and it covers some really interesting, like, weird stuff. So definitely check it out. All right, so moving on, Silent Hill 3. Not much really to share here, but kind of keeping with that whole Big J's theme, where the team wanted to, you know, I don't know, put me in the game. The team said, like, hey, we need to put together, you know, some different names for, like, locations and landmarks in the game. And so there's a part of the game called Hilltop Center. It's a pretty creepy area that you have to walk into and go up a couple down, and go up a couple floors, solve some things, and try to get out of there. But there's a part in the map on the third floor that there's a law firm, and they decided to call it Prindle and Enos Law Firm, and it's kind of a nondescript place. You can't actually go into it, and you know, quite honestly, if I was a lawyer, real lawyer working in Silent Hill, I clearly would have my doors shut too. So you can't really go inside it, but it's just quite funny that it's sitting there. But it's actually in a very important part of the game. But there's just this random law firm, and it just happens to have my name on it. So it's kind of crazy. Oh, by the way, Prindle, the Prindle was actually our lawyer, our real lawyer at the time at Konami. So we're now Prindle and Enos as partners in the law firm in Silent Hill 2 or Silent Hill 3. Here's a shot of the Silent Hill 3 team. What was really interesting about this is that, you know, Yamaoka-san, who I showed you in the previous slides, he's always done the music for the series. But when Silent Hill 3 came around, he got a shot at not only doing the music, but also producing the game from Japan side. So really awesome opportunity for him, and it really kind of helped catapult him even higher in the production realm. And then another just notable person to highlight is Ito-san. Ito-san is basically the guy responsible for all the crazy monsters in Silent Hill, all, you know, basically for 2 and 3. So really sitting down and talking with him for long times and hours, we just had some crazy conversations. Silent Hill 4, The Room. I don't really have much to show at this point on this. I have something a little bit later. But one thing I will say is this game kind of changed the premise of the game. It was more insular. It was you inside your room, kind of going out, traversing into other parts of, more like your mind, but basically, rather than exploring a giant town, although you did sort of do that in Silent Hill 4 The Room, it was more about the fears that are facing you inside the walls of your own confinement. And so the team, when they came to me, they said, like, hey, we really want to get reference of a lot of rooms, you know, people's rooms and where they live, and can we just go into people's houses? And I'm like, no, we can't just go into people's houses. And they're like, well, we also need to go into like tunnels and like, you know, go into like sewage pumps and lines and, you know, shit like that. And I'm like, yeah, we can't, we're gonna get arrested if we, especially in California, if we try to like break into like an area closed off and fenced off. But I was like, so we can't do tunnels and sewers. I can, you know, I'm sure there's lots of reference online. If we were in the Midwest or if we're in some other state, yeah, we could walk in anywhere. I used to do it when I was a kid. I loved going in through sewers and stuff like that. But for the room, since room was such an important part, it just so happened that back then my mom was in property management, and you know, she worked for this giant apartment complex, which will remain nameless just for the sake of I don't want any bad things happening. But we basically got full access to go into a lot of the empty apartments, and the team was able to like go and capture and take, you know, footage and camera pictures and everything. But they wanted to capture all kind of crazy stuff. Like the angle underneath the toilet porcelain throne, you know, and like, you know, what do you do? Like, what's the thing under the sink look like? And you know, so they did all kinds of different stuff, but it was really interesting. Okay, Metal Gear Solid 2. So on Substance, we brought this game to Xbox, and you know, it was basically Metal Gear Solid 2 with some extra stuff. But it was the first time we brought a Metal Gear game to Xbox. And so I wanted to just play the TV commercial here for you. Hopefully this works, because it has to link out of here to... why is it not showing me? It's not moving over to this other screen. Why is that? Okay, let me see. Maybe if I do this. No, it's still not refreshing. Well, that would really be a bummer. Let me see. Maybe if I exit presentation mode. Let me do that. Yeah, sorry for that. That's not a very good seamless transition, but all right. So let's watch this.
It's time for you to produce. I'm tired of your excuses. That report will do on my paper at 9 o'clock this morning. 9 o'clock this morning.
Introducing Metal Gear Solid 2, Substance, only on Xbox. The original smash hit, plus loads of extra gameplay, like over 500 new missions, exciting new storylines, and all new playable characters. Not to mention some of the meanest bosses you'll ever encounter. Metal Gear Solid 2, Substance, only on Xbox. Rated M for mature, from Konami.
What the?
Okay, so now let me jump back in here, see if I can do this quite easily. Not so easy. What is it?
Clearly, I'm an emotional eater. Because
I did not work on that. Sorry about that. Okay, so two Easter eggs from that commercial that had not ever been discussed or found. One you would never know, but that was shot. That whole commercial was shot in the Konami arcade office in Chicago before it closed down. And literally, there were still employees there, but a lot of it had not. Parts of it were not being used, so it made it as a perfect backdrop to do that commercial. The other thing, and I tried to find, I know somewhere buried in my boxes at home, I have full, like, high-res versions of these commercials where you would have been able to see this. I had to take what I could find off YouTube, and still, it's not so easy. But it's amazing. Back then, we didn't have HD, so it was like I still had a better quality version. But in this commercial, the report that the guy carries, it actually says TPS on the folders. We wanted to put a little funny nod to Office Space and make it the TPS report that he's basically loved. But no one has found that in the commercial, so you guys are the first ones besides me and the people that worked on the commercial to know that. So anyway, that was Metal Gear Solid 2. Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater. So you guys may know that throughout the game there's lots of cameo magazines, you know, some game magazines, some other magazines, and you can find these all littered throughout the game. The team wanted to also have like some, I would call them real magazines, real in the sense that, you know, they were more notable, and in addition to that, they wanted to have like the magazine as it was in the era of when the game was going on. So they came to us and said, hey, can you like maybe try to get Newsweek or Time Magazine or you know, stuff like that. And so I reached out to Newsweek, which is you know, it's a very upstanding publication. And I said, hey, we want to put you in this video game. The game takes place in the 60s during the Cold War. We'd love to get, you know, examples of what the magazine looked like at that time. And of course, we won't use one of the old covers. We'll make our own cover for it, but we want to use your template and design look. So they actually got me I couldn't believe it, but they actually got me the old design of the old magazine, and we picked the exact month that would have been relevant to the time that basically Naked Snake was in the game. So yeah, anyway, you can find this in the Gorky Lab first floor. But here's the thing: in the game, it's obviously lower resolution. Although they did make an HD remake of this, but I actually worked on making the high-res original source art for the magazine, and I came up with this whole cover and in the whole headline of the article. But if you shoot the magazine, you can actually knock it off the table, and then sometimes it falls just right where you can actually see the magazine open. Well, when it opens up, I was like, hey, we got to have something in there. So I basically had this whole stock photo and all this stuff. But again, because we did it at high resolution source, I actually wrote this article that's in the first page, and it actually, if you read it, if you use the zoom camera and can read this, it actually ties into what's going on with the build-up and behind the scenes of the game. And now with the HD remake, and because the source assets were originally high-res, you guys might actually be able to go and read this. Now, granted, there's nothing super crazy that you're going to get some revelation by reading it, but you're going to find it quite astonishing that we went to that level of detail, just for the sake of it. So obviously the second page is more blurred out, but it's harder to see that page in the game. Now, beyond Newsweek, they wanted to do the same thing with Playboy. Obviously, Metal Gear has always had kind of the girly mags in there, and they can kind of distract the soldiers. So this one is Playboy, and the same thing. We were able to get the original of that time, and this time Playboy was willing to let us use the actual cover model on the front. Like back then, they bought out all the photo rights, so it wasn't like they had any issues. So they bought them out, so we got the front cover. But I don't remember off the top of my head what we put in the middle of the article. So there may actually be something in there that we did, and I just can't remember. So if you do, with the HD version, maybe go check that out. And that's where it's located. It's on the basement 1 level. Speaking of Snake Eater, obviously one of the big things about it was the theme song. It's got that kind of James Bond-esque, sort of sound, and it's a beautiful song. Well, I love that song so much, and I really visualized that, hey, we should do something else with this song beyond the game. And back then, I was working on multiple franchises at Konami, and one of them happened to be Karaoke Revolution. So for those of you who've never played Karaoke Revolution, on the Volume 3 version, you can actually play Snake Eater and do it karaoke style. Now, what's so crazy, though, is that after I put it into Karaoke Revolution, you can actually go and do it karaoke in Japan. And who would have thought that it actually become a real karaoke song? And then beyond that, we also, here's Silent Hill 4, one of the main theme songs of Silent Hill 4 is also in Karaoke Revolution Volume 3 that you can sing. And then another game I was working on, Neo Contra, where I actually wrote the lyrics for the theme songs of the game. We had it all ready to go into Volume 3, and the problem was that the producer for Karaoke Revolution, he heard the song, and it's a crazy sounding song, a lot of high-pitched, singing. He's like, nobody's going to be able to sing this. And I'm like, I know, but people are going to want to sing this song. It's kind of got this weird sound. It didn't end up going in the game. The song itself was actually written by two folks that do a lot of the Dance Dance Revolution music. The girl on the left is a vocalist, Paula Terry. And so now we've got like DDR musicians making Neo Contra, trying to put into Karaoke Revolution. Meanwhile, Silent Hill music is actually going into Dance Dance Revolution that you can actually dance to. This is from Silent Hill 3. And then Karaoke Revolution songs are actually getting remixed into Dance Dance Revolution songs. And then eventually, the next volume of Karaoke Revolution has both music from Dance Dance Revolution as well as being able to do dance steps as well as sing. So now like all this stuff is kind of like colliding and doing crazy enough. But wait a minute, we're supposed to be talking about Metal Gear here, but the point is that trying to get this kind of level of collaboration is so difficult with Japanese teams and different teams, and it takes a lot of perseverance, but like I was sort of in a groove at this point. I was working on all this different stuff, and I was able to be like the puppet master to kind of make all these things together. So anyway, back to Metal Gear. I want to tell you a funny story about this guy. So we did these giant life-size statues. They're really super detailed, and you can probably find one on eBay. You know, maybe someone's parting one for like $1,500 or whatever. But the group that does this does most of the major mannequins. When you see like Master Chief, it's done by this group that does this. All they do is make these amazing life-size statues. I mean, this guy is like 6 feet tall. So we ordered a bunch of these for like press and giveaways and stuff. And when the game came out, we did a autograph signing session at GameStop in Universal City. So it's like one of the big GameStops. And so, you know, Hideo Kojima was there to do signing autographs and stuff. But earlier that day, we actually invited the press down to do interviews. And, you know, we had one of these guys in the room as a backdrop. And of course, back then we were like, all right, we'll just do it in a hotel. So I booked like a double room, one of those like adjoining rooms. So like my room is on the left, then the room that we used for the interviews is on the right. But you know, we had the doors connected. So I had this guy set up in the room that we did the interviews. Anyway, we do the interviews during the day. Then we go out to the signing event, and that's a whole night thing. We don't get done with that until like, you know, 10 p.m. And then, you know, we go out with the team to dinner and drinks and stuff like that. And I come back to my room, and it's like 2 in the morning. And I walk in, and you know, I'm in my room, but like again, the studio doors are open. I look in the mirror, and the reflection in the back is part of the statue of Snake. And I literally shit my pants, thinking that some guy is in my room with a gun drawn, and then I had to remember, oh, it's fucking Snake. You know, it's like, and that was just like I had a moment of heart attack, and then I was like, oh, God, the guy got me. Even though I knew all day he's sitting there, but he just at that moment I wasn't expecting it. So anyway, now a little trivia fun. So the poster that we gave out at that event actually got signed by Kojima and Yoji Shinkawa. Yoji Shinkawa is the mechanical designer to all the awesome stuff that's in the game. I actually have one of those posters that are signed by them from that event, which was now, what, 15 years ago? I've had this poster in my possession for 15 years. And I'm willing to basically give it to someone in this room, but you gotta earn it. So I've got some trivia questions. Some of them are tricky, so I've got a couple in case you don't know the answers to the first ones. So the artwork, now you gotta listen carefully. The artwork used for the box on the original Metal Gear, the NES Metal Gear, not Metal Gear Solid, we're talking about the original Metal Gear, it bears a striking resemblance to something else. What is it? What do you got?
Kyle Reese and Terminator.
You got it, dude! Yeah, you're welcome. Get that framed. That's great. I didn't have to get to question 2 or 3, which even got harder, but... okay. Keeping 8 minutes, oh my god. Dance Dance Revolution, 20th anniversary as of last month. You know, from the phenomenon, USA Today, and then moving into, you know, kids using it for exercise and health. And then something like getting it into movies like Grandma's Boy, and I want to show you this scene.
Switch again.
Oh yeah, you're right. Jeez. Figure out what's going on here. Exit that, and then just look it up.
Fruit cup. Nice. Way to go, Mom. Challenge. Quiet, Bobby. Can't you see Alex is sleeping? He's not taking challenges.
No. I'm challenging you, Jeff.
To what game?
Dance Dance Revolution.
That's great, Bobby, but we don't have Dance Dance Revolution, so you're dumb. Ultra Mixtape! When the hell did we get this?
It just came in this morning. Suddenly you're not such a big shit talker anymore, are you, Jeff?
Looks like my days are numbered here at Brain Museum. Well, can you at least go first so I can see what I'm doing?
Oh, with pleasure.
Yeah, lose the Woody Allen jacket.
Yeah, Metal Gear Solid 3 in the back.
Oh, how the mighty have fallen.
Good stuff, Bobby. Nice moves. That was hot. Well, let's see what we got here.
Are you ready? Dance!
That game is fun! Oh my god!
New high score!
What does high score mean? Is that bad? What does that mean? Should I break it?
Yeah, so that was super fun. But the interesting thing about that is those dance steps. Obviously, they're not doing that. That was actually me doing that. I used to be a pretty good player of Dance Dance Revolution on top of working on the game. So I worked with a production team that was doing the film, and they were like, hey, we want to do this scene. They explained it to me. So obviously the first song was a walk in the park. It's super easy, but they specifically wanted the next part to be something crazy hard. And so I basically did all the stuff off camera, captured it, me doing it, and then they basically played it back and made it look like he was doing it. But that's a little extra Easter egg. Here on the right is me and a couple of guys, working on the game. Now, if anyone in here is a huge DDR fan, you might see something peculiar about that picture on the left there. Basically, that's a DDR solo cabinet, which never had a Max 300 on there. So back when we were working on the game, we really needed something at a high industrial level to properly check the game and test the game and play it at the level that pro players would play at. You can't do that with just the home equipment. So we had to kind of jerry-rig. Me and the guy in that bottom picture in the middle there, Jim Hernandez, who worked with me on the project, we did a lot of home testing using actual machines, which he owns at his house, and it is the only way to really properly test the stuff. Here's some other shots of the DDR teams, just kind of working in action, different eras and different folks. That bottom right is a lot of the musicians that did a lot of the music games. Actually, one of the DDR games, the team wanted to idolize me in the game, so I'm actually one of the playable DDR characters. That's kind of crazy. The other thing is, in addition to working on the game, obviously the music was such a huge part, and me really trying to push DDR beyond just what it was as a game and also being celebrated for the music it was, I'd also commission and do all these different music albums, small mini albums, and over the course of the period of working on it, I did 16 albums, and most of these would give out at like events or at tournaments, or like if you pre-order your game at GameStop or whatever, you get these, but they were pretty much in limited edition print runs. And sadly to say, after the baton of who handled DDR moved on, because the Konami closed their office, and I didn't stay in the company, but these were basically the last two that ever got made, and actually these are 10 years old already. So DDR's in its 20th anniversary, these are already 10 years old. And it just so happens that I have a good supply of each of these. So everyone here, you're more than welcome to get both of these. And like I said, they're pretty hard to come by. And so at least you guys can have them. They're in mint condition. So if you want to eBay it, do whatever you want with it, listen to it, rip it, whatever. But anyway, DDR, this was in Washington, D.C. when we, at Capitol, like all the thousands of people playing DDR at the same time. It's pretty amazing. All right, I've got 2 minutes. Pac-Man. Really quickly, I don't know if you guys saw it, but there was a Bud Light commercial where they basically recreated the Pac-Man maze at life size, and I was working on this. and it was a huge deal to bring a life-size version of the game. And I'm just going to quickly flip through some production shots here. Lots of different cameras, huge insert coin. That quarter is the most expensive quarter. It's 25 cents, but it would cost about $500 for that to be made. Tons and tons of equipment in different angles. This overhead shot almost looks like you're looking at the arcade board. Being in the maze. For those who haven't seen it, we can do this again. Back out of that thing. So, of course, I got to see this ad first, brought to you by Expo.
Don't treat E&I as some separate standalone initiative. It is a fundamental core value for our company, wherever it is that the company does business.
Thanks.
What's up, guys? What's your name? So if I gave you a Bud Light, are you up for whatever happens next? Yeah. Check it out.
The perfect beer for stepping outside for some old school fun. Let's do this, yeah?
Push!
She's like, are you down for anything? Like, of course! Just give me a beer. You don't know what's going on, but whoa. What's this all about? My goodness.
Yeah, I had a lot to talk about that. Unfortunately, running out of time. There's a great behind-the-scenes video that I was going to show you, which isn't going to happen. I did have some Pac-Man trivia, which I've already 1 minute over time, so I think we have to. If you want to participate in the Pac-Man trivia, win some Pac-Man prizes, we can do it outside in the hallway. But had a lot of other good stuff to talk about. I was going to go into Splatterhouse because Halloween's around the corner, but we didn't get to Splatterhouse. But thank you for coming, and I'll be outside. Talk more. Oh, and here's CDs. I'll be outside. I can just get you guys your CDs. Thanks.